talk to us about your role in the furtherance of local news as of today.
Sure. First, I've got to tell an Evan Smith story. I just have to. And when the title of this, replicating the Texas Tribune, of course, the elephant in the room is there is no other Evan Smith, which is both terrific and a problem that we'll never fix, frankly. Evan is one of the greatest leaders I've ever been around. He is the best community builder I've ever been around, and he is one of the most natural fundraisers I've ever known. And I want to tell just a quick story. So Evan and I have a mutual friend. Her name's Julie Sandorf. She runs the Revson Foundation in New York. Evan says, I'm going to ask Julie for some money. And I said, Evan, Revson does Jewish causes, and they do New York. Pauses for maybe a nanosecond and says, but I'm an expletive New York Jew.
Fact check true.
Okay, American journalism.
And so, so Alberto is the most articulate person in America talking about the tie between local news and what he calls the staging ground for the center. And what the step further that Elizabeth and I took when we were first thinking about the American Journalism Project was what the center really means is a staging ground for compromise. And so what we believe is that, like 1968, when the Corporation for Public Broadcasting came into being, and we had a debate in this society about what we called educational content at the time, today the debate is far more fundamental, and it's about a common fact set on which to run our democracy. And so we have sort of three self-evident truths to the American Journalism Project. The first is that democracy and journalism are interdependent. The second is that the market has failed and failed irreparably in local news. And the third is that failure, and these are Alberto's words as well this morning, that failure and the fix that's required is a we the people fix. It's not a government fix, can't be relied upon to be a government fix, and it's not exclusively something that can be fixed by our commerce. And so what we envision is a new next generation of public service media that is governed by, that's sustained by, and that looks like the people it serves. The first step on that journey is to try to stand up somewhere between 25 and 35 Texas Tribune-like entities so we don't keep referring back to the same 2 or 3 all the time. We're doing that out of a $50 million first fund, which, as Jeff said, we're off to a good start with 42 committed. But the grant agreement that we have with the Knight Foundation, and this, Erin, my wife, asked me how I felt about this. On the line that says project size, it says $100 million. And so the Knight Foundation is serious. Erin and I are serious. Elizabeth is serious. And we're, as we said this morning, we're a lot closer to the beginning of this effort than we are the end.
So we're here, though, to talk about replicating the success of the Texas Tribune. So Evan, let's talk for a second about whether the Tribune can be leveraged, franchised, duplicated. Can it be?
One of the things John said to me early on was, I grew up in the restaurant business, and you do not franchise the restaurant until the first location of the restaurant is successful, and maybe you don't ever franchise the restaurant. We have been very conscious that we are not an In-N-Out Burger or a Chick-fil-A. You want to make your delicious chicken or your delicious hamburgers in your community, come and borrow parts of our recipe. We'll help you. We'll give you the recipe. We'll show you how the kitchen's laid out. But you go open your own restaurant because you know what serves your market and what the needs of your community are better than we ever would. We know Texas. We know Texas better than anybody. I will fight anybody for that title. But I don't know Nevada. I don't know Mississippi. And so it'd be arrogant of me to assume that John Ralston, in starting the Nevada Independent, would simply want us to take the Texas Tribune model in a kit, airlift it over and drop it down into Las Vegas, scrape off the word Texas and put Nevada. Or when Andy Lack came down to see us in Austin before giving the initial gift that ultimately became Mississippi Today, he didn't come to say, we're going to take everything you did and bring it to Jackson. He said, we want to learn from you about the things that you've done, the mistakes you've made so that we don't make them, and the things that you've done that are successful that are either can be emulated or can be replicated, and then we're going to go back and figure out what works for Mississippi. So the question of whether this can scale, I think, may be, respectfully, the wrong question. Because I believe every community has a need for this kind of public service journalism. In every community, there is a need to search for the truth and tell people what you found. In every community, there is a need to hold people in power and institutions accountable. In every community, there is a need to tee up the things important enough for people in their busy lives to stop and pay attention to, with the ultimate goal of motivating civic participation in some way. In every community, those things are necessary. How you get there is the journey that you choose, that's right for you. We all agree on the destination. And so we've never been arrogant enough, well, we've been arrogant in some respects, but we haven't been arrogant enough in the Texas Tribune to tell people in Nevada or Mississippi or anyplace else, this is how to do it. We've certainly suggested that it should be done and encourage people to do it and offer it as much help as possible, always at no cost, because somebody helped us. I got to say hi to Steiger here at the beginning, because I know that when ProPublica started, we felt very grateful to the folks at ProPublica, to Dick and to Paul particularly, for allowing us to stand on their shoulders. And so others are now standing on our shoulders, and the hope is that others will stand on the shoulders of those people down the road. This is a pay-it-forward deal. And not everybody has to come to the same conclusion about exactly how to do it, but we all should agree that it's important work to be done.
Well, thank you, but let me just follow up with the restaurant metaphor. I'm not an expert in franchising restaurants, but I know that it is a good chef that creates a good restaurant. And when that chef tries to open another location, if he or she is not there, there can be problems. So much of the success of the Texas Tribune from a consumer in Texas has been because of those wonderful skills that John talked about with regard to you. You are a force, and I think people in the audience have heard that in your voice. Elizabeth Green is a similar force at Chalkbeat. Are you two replicable? And how do we replicate more of you?
I absolutely think that we're replicable. I think when people say, a little lazily, not you, but the royal you, when you say that there are not people to lead these organizations, you haven't looked hard enough. The fact is, I was the editor-in-chief of a magazine. I had a rudimentary understanding of how the business of the magazine worked, but I certainly was not a business person. I was not a fundraiser in any professional or even quasi-professional sense. But I had a vision for what this thing could be that was John's vision. Our visions were aligned, not exactly the same, but aligned. And I think you have to put a team in place that can complement your weaknesses. You know, 9.5 years of this, the road behind us is littered with the bones of well-intentioned people who thought the only way to do this was by getting a bunch of journalists in a room and not thinking a whit about the business model. I am an absolute convert to the idea that the only way any one of these things works, and I think this goes back to the AJP, is that you have to have some core competency in the areas of the business, fundraising, the management of operations, all the ways that you do business in order for one of these things to succeed. Otherwise, it's a Pyrrhic victory. There have been a lot of Pyrrhic victories over the last 10 years that we've all seen, who we were cheering on, but we knew from the very beginning that without an adequate business model, we're never going to succeed. So those people do exist, but you have to look harder for them than you're looking right now.
Well, let me stick with this for a minute before going to my prepared question for Jennifer and ask her, you know, where is that conveyor belt of Evans and Elizabeth's? And off that conveyor belt then, are we pulling business people? Are we pulling journalists? Or are we pulling fundraisers?
Well, let's go back to what makes the American Journalism Project so important at this time. What the American Journalism Project will do is provide a whole new way for capital formation for not-for-profit journalism. It will provide the strategic guidance and the business expertise and the technology expertise that so many not-for-profit news organizations need to find a sustainable path. And that's, I would say, in addition to the extraordinary leadership that Evan and his team and John brought to the Texas Tribune, what they also brought was a very sharp focus on technology, on business, and on audience development. And by focusing on serving the people of Texas, that's how you were able to be so relevant and therefore generate the revenues to really help continue to make the Texas Tribune thrive. Because one of the most important things that we've really learned here at Knight Foundation, working with not-for-profit news organization leaders, is that just because an organization is not-for-profit, that doesn't mean that that not-for-profit news organization isn't thinking or should be thinking every single day about generating revenue. Because if you're not thinking about generating revenue, then you're not going to be able to support the generation of the journalism.